The urban legend of Cropsey has been told in many different versions. Through the 70s and 80s, in Staten Island, New York City, kids would tell the tale of a man who supposedly escaped the now abandoned Willowbrook Mental institution and began terrorizing the neighborhood by kidnapping children and killing them. Cropsey would lurk around playgrounds, in wooded parks and dark alleyways, and was described as a ghoulish figure with a hook for a hand. By now, most of us know the true story behind the legend. In the early 2000s, filmmakers Joshua Zeman and Barbara Barcaccio set out to film a documentary investigating the story. They stumbled upon the very real case of 5 children who went missing during the 70s and 80s, as well as the case of convicted kidnapper Andre Rand, who is suggested to be the origin of Cropsey. Growing up in a small, isolated town, I remember being told a similar story. Unfortunately, I don't remember many details, but according to the local legend, every 10 years or so, a man would go on a killing spree in the wooded outskirts of our town, using an axe to break into people's houses and brutalize his victims. Every time he would manage to escape authorities and disappear into thin air. Of course, this is just a story us kids would tell to scare each other, right? But every tall tale has a grain of truth in it. The real story takes place in 2006, at the end of November, in the town where I grew up. High on cannabis and rohypnol, an 18-year-old man attacked and killed both his parents with an axe and knife as they slept in their bed. Surprisingly, this gruesome case never got much media coverage and is not very well known outside of my hometown, let alone outside of my country. The version of the story my friends and I would tell is most likely the result of children trying to make sense of a reality far too horrible and brutal to comprehend. So we turn the tragic event into a legend and the killer into an imaginary boogeyman. In today's video, I am going to share 3 stories written by Reddit users, first published on LetsNotMeet. These stories are significantly different from one another, but they do have one thing in common. They are cautionary tales of what happens when you put your trust in the wrong people, of what happens when we seek comfort in people with ill intent. No matter how well we think we know someone, we might never truly know what secrets they hide from us. I was 11 at the time, and living in a nice suburban area. We had recently moved into this house my parents had built, and it was our first home versus rented house in sketchy area. It was a very nice neighborhood. The whole family made friends quickly, with lots of neighbors, but especially the ones 3 doors down. They had a daughter my age. I'm male, by the way, and a daughter 5 years younger, which was the same age as my sister. Our parents got along well, and we began hanging out quite a bit, for barbecues at their house, or parties at our house, etc. Friendships were formed quickly and seemed to be very strong. After a year or so, I started realizing things weren't what they seemed. I remember seeing police cars at their house a few times in the evenings, and when I'd ask my parents what was going on, it was always nothing. Just checking in on them type answers. I was no genius, but at 11 that didn't add up. Why didn't the cops just check up on us? One day I'm at their house, playing, hanging out, and the daughter goes across the street to get another mutual friend, which left myself and the father alone in the house. This was no big deal, as it has happened before. But then he approached me and just seemed off. I still don't know what made me feel this way, but I was very uncomfortable and started thinking about leaving. About 5 minutes later, he tells me he has something cool to show me. I don't remember what it was, but I think it was something about baseball cards, which I was very fond of. I excitedly started following him. He pulled the attic ladder down and asked me to follow him, which I did without hesitation, at first. Then, something happened and I still can't process what it was. He was ahead of me on the ladder, and when he looked back to help me into the attic, there was something off. Something about his eyes, his face, his grin. It wasn't right. It looked evil. I can still see it clear as day and can't recognize exactly what it was that set my alarms off. Whatever it was plenty, because I jumped off the ladder and ran out the door. I sprinted all the way home and was choking back tears when I busted through my door. Mum was there when I came through and could see I was obviously out of sorts, and immediately started calming me down. As I came to my senses, I explained what happened. My mum was concerned with how scared I was, but mostly brushed it off to me being scared, young or silly. I kid you not. That same exact night, I was woken up at around 3 a.m. It was my mum, sitting on my bed, and as I awoke, she held me like a baby. I remember how she smelled, and how tightly she held me, and I remember her tears hitting my cheek. Eventually, I looked out the window to the neighbor's house, surrounded by police and fire trucks. The neighbor dad had killed himself and his daughter in the attic after a standoff with police. There isn't a doubt in my mind, nor my mother's. That would have been me had I made it into the attic. I still get chills thinking about it. So neighbor man, let's not meet, even in the afterlife. I graduated high school almost a year ago. I had really no urge to attend college or the military, and basically got stuck in my boring hometown for months, where I slowly became dependent on Xanax and booze and was destined to repeat the cycle of white trash set before me by my parents. I knew I had to leave town, so I decided to sign up for a website you might have heard of called WWOOF, Worldwide Opportunities in Organic Farming. You pay a small fee and they make available a directory of organic farming operations that will feed you and allow you to live with them, in return for a certain amount of work around the farm. The place I decided to commit to was a Hare Krishna community in the deep south. I got there and my car almost immediately broke down. It was a 30-year-old Chevy Blazer I bought on Craigslist for $500. Later on, I was to find out it was beyond repair at this point. The closest town was almost 20 miles away, so I found myself stranded and surrounded by the most unbearable hipsters. To be more specific, I'd say about a third of the population of the community were either first or second generation Indian immigrants living near the temple for religious reasons. Another demographic were aging hipsters, also there for spiritual purposes, but also running the small-scale organic farm located on the property. Everyone else, however, self-absorbed, condescending, right out of college but vapid as shit hipsters. I basically kept to myself, but occasionally was forced into conversations about vibrating crystals and their 3-year spiritual journey no doubt being funded by their parents. I had been there for 3 weeks and was desperate for a real conversation, and then Michael showed up. I had heard stories about Michael. A couple of days before I showed up, he had left to retrieve an impounded car in a large city about an hour away. Everyone said he was lazy, insane, and would spend hours up in his room doing yoga instead of coming down and working with the rest of us. He showed up late in the evening, going on about how he was going to really get involved with the farming and throw himself into Krishna consciousness. He was in his early 30s. He spoke like a stoner cartoon character. He reminded me of many of the friends I had left back home. We became fast friends, and he was the only person there who didn't give me the urge to bite my fingers off when he spoke. We were both from Texas, so we talked about the loony conservative teachers we had in high school, football, and of course drugs. Every now and then, he brought up subjects that really sort of threw me off. He wasn't able to get his car out of the impound garage, so he schemed the best way to break it out. These plans involved firearms, pipe bombs, and telepathy. He told me he came to the Hare Krishna temple to befriend some of the gurus and learn Reiki meditation, a form of meditation used to control the minds and bodies of other people. He told me he believed he had used Reiki once to seduce a woman at a party. This is when I understood his reputation. I simply nodded and laughed occasionally when he went off on these rants. I knew one day I would reach a saturation point for his absurdity, but I could probably endure a week more. A couple days later, we were eating lunch with one of the gurus. I was telling Michael about my trip to the giant field where the Branch Davidian used to be. He wasn't sure what the Branch Davidian was, so I explained to him about Waco, David Koresh, and the botched siege by the FBI and ATF that led to the death of 76 Davidians and 4 ATF agents. He was enraged. The government is always trying to silence people preaching the truth. That's so messed up. I wanted to explain to him that David Koresh was a sociopathic cult leader, interested in power and nothing else, but he wasn't having it. Now, I was angry. He was having a tantrum about a subject, and I had just explained to him, and now he's telling me I'm wrong and that Koresh was a martyr. This is when I saw the truly insane Michael. He was spitting, red as a beet, pacing back and forth. I left the table and got back to work, but he followed me. After half an hour of this absurd argument, I couldn't handle it anymore. I'm not having this conversation with a loon, Michael. How can I expect logic from you? You came here to get superpowers. The look in his eyes changed from anger to hatred. He got real still and went at me. Michael was a big guy, much, much bigger than me. He lunged at me, and I ran. As I ran, I went through my pocket, praying I had grabbed my knife before I left my cabin. I know it sounds ridiculous, but you don't walk my old neighborhood without some sort of protection. Plus, it was a pretty useful tool on the farm. Luckily, I had grabbed it and turned around so he saw it. He stopped and contemplated for 3 seconds. He quickly turned around and finished his lunch. The next day, I pulled the temple president aside and explained what happened and that we had to get rid of him. It didn't take much convincing. No one really cared for him, and he wasn't much help on the farm. I felt bad snitching on the guy. He was in a pretty desperate situation. He had no car, no money, and I can't imagine he had many friends. The temple president also informed me that he had been an alcoholic for 10 years and had come here to get sober. I found it very strange he never told me this. Later that day, I saw through my window someone drive up and hand him several suitcases to pack what little he had, and I saw them both drive off to God knows where. Weeks went by, and the whole encounter kind of faded from my conscience. But late one night, I got a text. "Hey, this is Michael. We can get my car out for $280. Wanna go traveling?" I never responded. I wasn't sure how he got my number, but I figured he looked me up on Facebook or something. A few nights later, I was in the temple office using the Wi-Fi to make some emails. I was making the walk back to my cabin, and from the pitch black, I hear a lot of loud banging coming from a barn. I remember thinking it must be an animal, but also thinking it must be a pretty big one to make that much noise. I entered my cabin. The actual door to the cabin doesn't have a lock, but my bedroom did, so I used that one. I was pretty unsettled by the banging, but I figured my imagination was getting the best of me. Later that night, I woke up needing to take a piss. The cabin didn't have a bathroom, but we had a shared outhouse. I didn't feel like putting on shoes and walking around in the dark, so I figured I'd just piss in the sink. I know it's gross, but I'm the only one who uses that kitchen. I opened my bedroom door and nearly pissed myself right there. Michael, completely naked, was crouching in a corner of my kitchen, facing the wall. I made a noise I wasn't aware I could make, something you would only hear Shaggy make on Scooby-Doo. This noise alerted Michael to my entrance. All he did was glare at me and shook his whole body. I slammed my door and locked it almost immediately. I knew what he was trying to do. He was trying to pacify me with Reiki meditation. I called 911. I didn't open my door or even approach it until I saw the red and blue lights outside my window. Michael wasn't there when they arrived. My guess is he ran deep into the woods that surrounded the farm. I explained me and Michael's history and what had happened that night. There wasn't much they could do since no one seemed to know anything about Michael. I didn't even know his last name. I had to leave the farm shortly after. Calling the police was really frowned upon since I believe many of the old hippies thought they were still avoiding the draft. I didn't mind leaving either. I couldn't sleep knowing Michael might be out there in those woods, angrier than he was before. I stayed up almost 3 days while I waited for my friend to come pick me up. To start, I am a teenage female. I had my own apartment for the first time, having recently moved to a new city to study. I quickly made friends with a group of fun but somewhat troubled teenagers that spent their days loitering at a local coffee shop. One girl I met, in particular, is who this story is about. I instantly felt a strong sense of caring about her. She is sweet, bubbly, and the moment I met her remains one of my favorite and most clear memories of her. This girl tells me of a man named Mike who is like a father to her. He wants to adopt her. Let's note, this girl doesn't have an ideal family. Her real father is in jail, and she has a very low self-esteem as he just doesn't give her the care she deserves. I soon met him, and right away I thought he was great. I was being so naive. He was a scary-looking biker, in his 50s, had some awesome tattoos, told stories of great experiences, travel, and seemed quite educated. I thought I was so mature, and didn't think it was odd that we quickly became good friends, as the girl previously mentioned, felt safe with him and we both cared for her. We would drive around, talk about everything. I went to him crying and he made me feel better within a few hours when the boy I was dating cheated on me and then dumped me. I felt powerful having a friend like him. His favorite subject was the girl. He had met her a couple years prior, by chance, at this coffee shop. She looked exactly like his eldest daughter had at her age. He told me that 2 years prior, his oldest daughter, out of 3, had committed suicide. The girl had filled a void. I felt for him and understood. A few months pass and the girl is staying with him. She is soon to be of legal adoption age when she can choose to be adopted by him, and he is getting more and more excited. Alongside her, I am the person who is closest to him. We spend time talking on the phone, visiting. I sleep at his house, I hang out with the girl, and am teaching her how to drive. Mike was like a father to me in this new town. He watches out for me. He tells me I am important to him, like the girl is. He would do anything for me. Some of the things he does for me includes letting me leave a project car in his yard, buying parts for it and helping me work on it, and aggressively confronting a boy who took advantage of me while I was intoxicated. Sorry for the huge setup, but it needs to be understood that I trust and look up to Mike with everything I have. 6 months after meeting him, this girl turns of age to be adopted. I am now staying in a nearby town, not seeing them as much, but still visiting on weekends. I get a call from Mike, and he is thrilled to tell me she has asked to be adopted by him, and he wants to have a big party. I am excited and congratulate him. The last time I saw the girl was a few days before this, and just as our first meeting is vivid in my memory, so is our last goodbye. A few days later, I hear she has been reported missing, and Mike is gone, ignoring my texts and eventually deleting his social media. Everyone is in a panic. This girl is adored by everyone, and is as innocent as they come. This is the start of 2 months of major anxiety and guilt and hurt that Mike had left me. I thought he was there for me. For some reason, I still don't think he would do anything to hurt her. He loved her and protected her. Until a couple weeks later, on Facebook, I see a comment on one of the articles. The police are now searching for Mike, wanting to question him, although he is not a suspect. A girl has commented, "I am Mike's daughter. Can someone please get me in touch with the family immediately? He is dangerous. I do not believe she is safe if she is with him." I message her right away, give her the girl's grandmother's number, and ask her what she means by he's dangerous. As we talk, I learn about a few things. He never had 3 daughters, only 2. This girl I am talking to is the oldest. When she was a child, he abused her, and the girl who I care about so much is a spitting image of his real daughter when she was a teenager. They had had a falling out 2 years prior, the time of his oldest daughter's supposed suicide. I also learned that the girl certainly had not wanted to be adopted. She had thought this was way too much, however she was being groomed and enjoyed the gifts, someone who would give her whatever she wanted, a father figure while hers was not around. I suddenly am thinking about all the red flags. How could I have been so stupid? He had talked about his time in the Angels. He had put a man in the hospital shortly before I met him, after a bar argument. He spent his days hanging around this coffee shop with teenagers. I have experiences with creepy and dangerous men of all ages. He totally had me fooled. I think of the times he told me he cared about me, as he did her. The times he picked me up drunk from parties, drank at my house, I slept at his house. Never once did he do or say anything inappropriate, but he had always been overly protective. The police and news reporters are calling me almost daily, asking me what I know about him, asking for all these details. I ignore the reporters, fearing he will see me on TV. He is eventually found, questioned, and released. Not a suspect. He disappeared again, and I never spoke with him. 2 months after this lovely girl goes missing, her body is found. It is deemed a homicide. This was 1 year ago. There are no leads and no other info released by police. I have not heard from Mike. There have been many crazy theories since then, lots of speculation. I don't want to believe he did it, and he has not been arrested or made a suspect, but everyone thinks that he is most likely the killer. He lied about many things. I learned the truth from his real daughter and can't possibly include it all here. I wonder where he is. I wonder if one day I'll be minding my business and he will appear. Something in me still doesn't believe he could hurt me. Another part wonders, could it have been my body found? But the worst part is the tremendous guilt I feel. I was with him all the time. I spent time with these 2. Why didn't I intervene? I am so sorry. I realize I am not as sneaky as I thought, and an article is now in the comments about my friend. A Google search of her name will show many more. I doubt he will find this post, but if any more reporters contact me, or if a problem arises from me posting this, I will have to delete this. But this is my confession. It had to be told, and I hope I can keep my privacy. So, old man, let's not meet again, although I do miss you.